took his name as their own, the Van Fraassens, who will be performing later this evening at his house. Outside of philosophy, he has published short stories which complement his philosophical writings. And in addition to that, he has been an enthusiastic rock climber for many years, and we certainly hope that he will hang on for a number of years to come. In fact, because of a climbing accident, Boz received the Barefoot Award on crutches. And one colleague remembers that he had to be flown back to Princeton in a private plane, compliments of the university trustee in order to receive the Barefoot Award because of his accident. Is that true, Boz? But it's certainly a part of the Bob Ross legend. Even though it may be false, please don't tell anybody else. Boss has also recently taken up the trapeze with his characteristic enthusiasm. And his personal webpage contains a photo of him flying across the page with the wings trapeze. Boz has been, I think, one of the most distinguished and most original and certainly most colorful members of the profession and of the department. And I think he leaves behind us a gap possible to fill. And we are, of course, deeply sorry that he will be retiring at the end of this year. But I've asked a number of his colleagues to come up and offer reminiscences. I would like to ask people who know him in different contexts here at Princeton. The first person I would like to ask to come up and say a few words is Paul Nasrif, who has been here, for the entire time that Boz has been back.
I thought of telling some lies, but actually the truth is sufficiently close to unbelievable that I might as well stick with the truth. Dan said much of, at least the historical part of what I wanted to say. I did meet Boz first, I think in 1966 or 65, whatever it was. I think it was the Christmas meetings when he was a graduate student on the job market. And it was in Philadelphia the year that the hotel we stayed at was then ultimately closed down with Legionnaire's disease. I don't know that it has anything to do with anything, but that is a fact. That is, I think, it's a fact. We did try very hard to get him to come to Princeton at that point. I don't remember why. I mean, I don't remember exactly why, except he seemed to be the brightest and most interesting and perhaps somewhat misguided person on the market that year. He showed that he was misguided by his then subsequent unintelligible move to a place that hasn't had a philosophy department, as far as I can tell, for decades. And his, unfortunately, going there did not create one. So he left, and he went to Toronto, and then to Venice Beach for a while. But I never gave up. I never gave up. And so, being bitten with the Van Fraassen bug, kept after him until my colleagues, I tried again, and lo and behold, he agreed this time to come. I don't know. You say that was 1981. That's a long time ago.
Yep.
That's 27 years. It's a long time. It's longer than I can imagine. And I don't remember any of that, except that I remember being the elation that the phone, yeah, wow, he said yes. He was then the playboy of the Western world. There was even a play written about him. What's his name? Irish playwright. But this is what we thought we were getting. You know, we needed playboys. But what did we get? After a small initial playboyish type beginning, they got so serious. And it was actually quite wonderful. Look, he's been for all this time an epicenter of the intellectual life of the department. Not the center, because there have been a number of epicenters. But he certainly held his own in a situation in which there were a lot of attractions pulling students this way and that way and so on. And we could tell by the attendance tonight and by the presentations that we had today that he's had a really marvelous bunch of students. One of the things that's impressed me most about Bas as a teacher, people have talked about his intellectual contributions enough. I will not say anything about that. But one thing that impressed me most about Bas as a teacher is that he was able to take students from a variety of different backgrounds with a variety of different levels of ostensible talents, and somehow, by some magic in his, wherever it is, turn them into really leading important contributors to the subject. And some people are okay with students who are, terrific from the start, and other people are okay with students who, can bring people along. But Bas somehow was able to find the gold that was buried in students, and with this kind of Socratic help, bring it out. And it didn't matter whether the student was a hotshot star to begin with, or whether the student was someone who had no particular interest in the subject but was here working. I've seen a great variety of different people. All of them come out and really do themselves, him, and us proud. And this is a gift that not many people have. Not many people are able to find and encourage and nurture and develop the best in the people that they encounter. And Bas absolutely, beyond anyone that I've known, has that. I don't think we've lost it quite yet. And for this, I think we will all be eternally grateful. Those of you here who have already given testimony to the contribution that he's made to your own lives, know that. Know it better than I do. But I think it's good that other people know it as well. And that's my only small contribution to this discussion. And Bas, on behalf of all of us, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Alexander and Hamas would like to make some remarks as well as their colleague Bas's. Take the microphone, please. Put it on.
Okay, it's not worth it because I'm not going to be here that long. I come to forgive Bas, not to praise him. I was a philosophy wannabe, and I ran the philosophy club. And one of my teachers there, a man called Richard Schuldenfrei, had known Bas at Pittsburgh, and he said to us, you know, you have to invite this guy. He's the brightest guy around. You have to invite him to give a paper, a lecture. So we did, and he accepted. And he gave us as his title, Is Nietzsche's Eternal Recurrence Consistent with Various Theories of Time? Now, I was in my heavy metal days then, so that's totally inappropriate as a subject. But I was impressed by my teacher, so I prepared this extremely florid introduction, not at all my style, to introduce him. I give the introduction, I'm told by people who remember the occasion, that lasted at least 12 minutes, which in fact was about as long as Bas's lecture, in which he argued that yes, Nietzsche's theory of the eternal recurrence was consistent with Leibnizian time, insofar as it is a relative understanding of time and things can in fact repeat themselves, but not consistent with Newtonian time. And that's about all he said. So about 15 or 20 minutes into the lecture, it was over. And nobody had anything to say. And I have heartily detested him, resented him, and hated him. But I thought that tonight it's time to clear the air. So, for putting me on the spot in a terrible way, 43 years ago, whatever horrible number it is, I wish you the best. In the meantime, you've earned my admiration, my affection, and my very deep respect. And I wish you all the best. We can be friends from now on. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Alexander. I'd like to bring up now Adam Elga, who has recently actually co-taught a seminar with Bas.
Ned said it's the death of a grad program. Ned said it's the death of a grad program when a dominant orthodoxy comes in. And the thing that I think is distinctive about my experience with Bas, first of all, directly, and second of all, through dealing with his students, including Ned and Alan here, who I both talked to a lot as a grad student, was that he was a different person to different people. So when I would ask Ned about Bas, Ned would say, "But Bas thinks," and there was this fire in his eyes. That's like riling him up. And then when I would ask Alan, Alan would say, "But Bas thinks," and it's like, oh, this like intricate moves. And I think I was very impressed with the way he was bringing out the distinctive features of each student. And it was my pleasure to learn a little bit about this from him when I was teaching with him. Someone said to me when I was maybe gonna take the class with von Fraassen, they said, "Oh yeah, those philosophy of quantum mechanics guys, it's this weird thing, but all the philosophy of quantum mechanics guys are really, really nice people." And he definitely went along with that stereotype. I think it's true. When I was at a conference with Hans Halvorsen and I managed to lock us out of our room, Bas said, "Don't worry about it." We went up to the next story up, went out onto a balcony and jumped onto the wall and just scampered down the wall and got us out through the inside. It's no problem. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alan. There are quite a number of students at Bas's who are here this evening, and it is impossible to ask each of them to speak, but I'm going to ask Lori Paul to say a word on behalf of some of the students who had studied with Boz during his time here. Some of them have already spoken during the conference, but please, Lori, come up and say a couple of words.
Okay, so in the spirit of reminiscence, when I first got into grad school, I was really excited about going to Princeton. I hadn't heard about any of those guys like David Lewis, whoever, right? But I had heard about Boz von Fraassen. And I'd even read part of the Scientific Image, and I was really psyched about the opportunity to kind of come and work with Boz. And so psyched that I started emailing him the spring before I started my graduate program and sent him a paper and demanded that he respond. And Boz very, very generously did. In fact, it's only now as a faculty member myself that I realized just how deeply annoying I was. and you know, for me, this illustrates, you know, Boz's generosity of spirit and his amazing, you know, support of students, especially annoying and confused ones like myself. When to say, you know, I worked with him before I got to Princeton. I even had a unit before I think I even officially started the graduate program. So I just want to say, you know, thank you for all the support that I had. Now this, you know, relationship that we had continued, and Boz, throughout my confused and difficult years as a graduate student, and those of you who knew me knew this is no exaggeration, Boz was still, he taught me, he helped me, he supported me, and even when as a third-year graduate student I came to him and said, Boz, you know, I've been working with him, he's one of the directors of my dissertation. I said, Boz, I've decided to do analytic metaphysics. And Boz looked at me and he sighed. But then his eyes lit up and he said, the key, you know, the successful graduate student is the student who refutes her teacher. And so, you know, in that spirit, he gave me his blessing and allowed me to go on and do analytic metaphysics. I think with the hope that eventually I would see the light and return to the fold. We're still working on that part. So that might explain to some of you why this token analytic metaphysician at this constructive empiricist party, right, is kind of lurking around the edges, defending vainly, you know, the possibility of doing analytic metaphysics. And I guess, you know, I just, again, want to say thank you. It's not often that you get to thank in person someone who was a real mentor to you, who really, you know, made a real difference to your intellectual development. In particular, you know, Boz is a visionary, and he sees the big picture, and he really, I think, thinks carefully about the intellectual perspective one should have towards philosophy. And even though I've betrayed him by becoming a metaphysician, I hope and try to continue to take the big picture in some ways and get to know. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to ask Brad Monton, another graduate student who worked with Boz, but also who continues to be a climbing partner with Boz, to come up and say a few words.
Okay. I'm honored and pleased to have been Boz's graduate student, and I'm honored and pleased to have co-authored a paper with Boz. But what honors and pleases me most is to have been Boz's longtime climbing partner. And we've just had so much fun out there on the cliffs having our adventures. And I'd like to just talk briefly about that tonight to give you a sense of what goes on when we're out there. And I guess the thing for philosophers, maybe the place to start is why? Why do we rock climb? I can only speak for myself, but I think, you know, Boz will concur in at least this. So as a philosopher, you kind of sit around and think a lot, right? And you don't get much exercise doing that. But then when you go out and get on a cliff, you're getting the physical exercise. You're out there, you're breathing the fresh air. But we're philosophers, we can't turn it off. You still get to think too. Because so often when you're on a climb, you have to puzzle it out. How in the world are you going to make this move? How in the world are you going to get up to that hold? And in the same way that Bas is a good philosophy teacher, Bas is a good climbing teacher too. He can tell you what to do or show you what to do, and you can get yourself in that position and do something that you didn't think was possible. Was it in the scientific image, Bas, that you dedicated it to Etruscan places? Laws of symmetry. Etruscan, is that it? Yeah. I didn't know what that meant. It means like far away, That shows how cultured I am. But anyway, climbing clearly is the sort of activity that takes you to Etruscan places. Bas and I have been to Yosemite. We've been to southern France. We've been to Ralph Stover State Park in Pennsylvania. I mean, these are places that you would not find yourself at were you not going in search of a cliff to scale. What's that? Las Vegas. Oh, of course, Las Vegas. Red Rocks in Las Vegas. We stayed at a casino hotel and then would drive out of the city to find rocks to climb.
Have you actually climbed in any of the Etruscan places?
No. You have, I haven't. But in spirit, they're all Etruscan places. Las Vegas, not the least. One of the climbs that I have the fondest memory of is this knife-edge ridge that's up in Tuolumne Meadows as part of Yosemite. And I'm blanking on the name of the ridge. Maybe you'll remember. Mathis Crest, yes. And the guidebook says, this is a great line from the guidebook, no tourist has ever seen this ridge. And what the guidebook means is that tourists just go out for like a day hike. They park their car, they hike for a little while, they go back to their car, right? To get to this ridge, you have to hike for basically like a day and a half. And you're out there in the middle of, not civilization. And, you have to hike off trail to get to this ridge, and then you climb up to the top of this ridge, drops for sometimes, hundreds of feet on both sides, and the ridge is maybe like this wide. Seriously, this wide, and you're like climbing up and down along it. It's an amazing experience. Bas is an ideal sort of partner to do it with. Why is Bas an ideal partner to do that sort of thing with? When I talk to other philosophers and they find out that I'm one of Bas's climbing partners, sometimes I get the attitude, oh, that must be so great that you're out there and you get to like talk lots of philosophy with Bas. Well, I mean, we're busy doing other stuff. We're climbing, right? So not that much philosophy goes on. And then, sure, there's like, you're back at camp and, there's time sitting around, hanging out, but it gets dark and by that point you're tired. And, so, I mean, not that much philosophy goes on, I think, when we're hanging out there. Occasionally. But I don't think we've had any great insights on the coast. But that said, I mean, Bas is a great guy to talk with, even when you're not talking philosophy. And especially when you're in like a party of three, one person might be climbing and two of you might be sitting 500 feet up, on this ledge, right? And, it's beautiful views, and we have certainly had nice conversations doing things like that. One of the amazing things about Bas's climbing abilities that go above and beyond the climbing abilities of other climbers. Bas is not like the best climber around. He's not like Bill Ramsey, but I mean, in the sense that like he's not doing world-class stuff. But he's a really solid, good climber. And part of what makes him a solid, good climber is his persistence. For some people, Alan Hyatt can attest to this. Climbing can be sort of a boring activity, right? There's a lot of sitting around. We took Alan, and that was his main impression, I think. There's a lot of sitting around. I have been at the base of a cliff for an hour, and probably even longer, belaying Bas up a single pitch. He's trying to get 100 feet up, right? And I sit there for an hour while he slowly moves up this crack. That particular crack I have in mind at the base of El Cap? Yeah. Moby Dick, right. And, I mean, you would think, and this is vertical, right? He's not sitting on ledges hanging out, right? He is climbing a completely vertical crack for an hour. I would get tired, right? my arms would give out, but not Boss. He move by move works his way up this cliff. And sometimes I wonder how he is so productive philosophically. And then I think back to Moby Dick and that crack, and it's that sort of persistence that gets him places in life, not just climbing. Another way in which Boss was persistent, I wasn't going to mention this, but Dan mentioned Boss's nasty fall where he broke his arm and his leg, and I was there for that. People like Anya accused me of dropping Boss. I want to make clear that much as, I sort of wouldn't mind taking the blame, I guess, it was Boss's fault. And, yeah, okay. But again, his persistence, he healed and totally went back to climbing, and he's learned not to wrap his rope around bushes and expect the bush to hold. But, the persistence stays on. Boss has a special skill. Like, if you ask me, what is Boss best at when it comes to climbing? What Boss is best at is face climbing. Face climbing, especially what we call low angle face climbing, meaning it's not vertical, it's like maybe 80 degrees instead of 90 degrees, okay? So still, by climbing standards, that's a low angle. And what makes face climbing so fun is that the holds are really small. You could get on a face climb that had ladder type holds, but that's not fun. What's fun is to get on the climbs where the holds are really small. One might even, in certain moods, be willing to say that the holds are unobservable. A Boss probably wouldn't say that. They are really small. And and it requires a certain element of faith to put your foot on a hold and put your weight on it and expect that hold to hold. Because what you're looking for are just micro edges in the rock. And the sort of thing that neophyte climbers look at and say there's no way that would support my weight. But if you trust it, it usually does. And Boss has trust in his climbing abilities and in the rock. We have done climbs. This face climb that I have in mind in Tuolumne. I can't remember the name of that one either. Oh, it's called, not dike route, but the one where you follow the dike? Dike route. Yeah. So you're following this dike that's maybe an inch raised off the main surface of the rock. And then there are these little micro holds that you're trying to follow as well. And it's like some 80-degree climb. And there's no place to place protection. Protection is the gear you bring up to put in the rock. So when you fall, the thought is you wouldn't fall all the way to the ground, the protection will hold you. But there are occasionally bolts drilled into the rock. But these bolts are really far apart. We're talking, 60 feet apart, 80 feet apart. So you're climbing, and so you're 300 feet up, and you're climbing 80 feet above your last bolt. So if you fall, you're falling 80 feet plus another 80 feet, because you're 80 feet above the bolt. You're falling a long way. Now, you probably wouldn't die, because you wouldn't hit ground, but you would be really, really, really scraped up and beaten up, going down this long stuff. Boss, he does that. I love climbing stuff like that. I don't want to lead stuff like that. Boss gets up there and he'll just go, move by move, trusting those micro edges, right? Getting the balance just right. So he climbs up, and they're really cool the way they place these bolts. Sometimes, the hardest move is just before you get to the next bolt. And Boss does it, and all the power to him for doing climbs like that. It's very impressive. So Boss has the persistence, he has the face climbing skills, he has the faith in the unobservable holds. What Boss has the most, and this is the hardest to describe, is he has the right attitude. He's like a generous climber. There can be climbers, who might get mad and sort of be self-centered about oh, they want to go do this, and oh, if they didn't do that, they're going to be humpy the rest of the day. And Boss doesn't like that at all. He's so good about having the right attitude and being calm and focused and just taking what comes and being willing to teach people to be new climbers. He helped teach me to climb, and I've seen him teach other people as well. And it's really just the right spirit one should have in climbing, and it's the spirit that I think we've all seen in various aspects of Boss's life. And we're pleased to have him around having that attitude. Thanks.
Bill also told me in those early days when I was at Western, Boss's parties. Yeah. man, those parties. He'd get this sort of faraway look in his eyes. So, now, I don't know about you, but I didn't come to Princeton for the nightlife. Well, there was waltz night. But, you know, various graduate students with me, we came in and some of us were feeling homesick, or lonely, or estranged in our own ways. And, you know, Bas really looked out for us and really welcomed us. And he had those parties, and man, those parties. So in particular, many of them had the form of music nights, and various illustrious performers performed in Bas's living room. David Lewis, somewhat implausibly, sang various Australian folk songs. And the Van Fraassens were born, and we've got Mike and Martin and Lyle here. I guess Dick forgot to show up. Anyway, so the Van Fraassens used to perform there, and in particular, there was this memorable time when Dick Jeffrey joined us. He did this stirring rendition of "I'm Your Prisoner and You're My Dilemma." And then there were the Spanish coffees. Now, Ned told you how they were made. Let me tell you something about their effect. So, they were like truth serum. And it was startling, some of the confessions that we heard from faculty members. Actually, I have indelibly etched, this isn't so much a confession, but this memory of Rich Thomason prostrate on your living room floor and yelling how the only thing wrong with torture is the indignity of it. And I remember thinking, what about the pain? Anyway, so just truly great time. So it goes without saying, you know, this is a place of true intellectual richness, but I just want to thank Bas and acknowledge him for his considerable part in making it a place of real social richness as well. Thanks, Bas.
Thank you very much. Bas, I'd like you to come up at this point. We have a few tokens to give you. We were hoping to be able to, few people know that Bas has been interested recently in the trapeze. And
after Anya, everybody knows.
Very fewer people know that there was actually a movie with Burt Lancaster, Gina Lollobrigida, Tony Curtis, and Bas van Fraassen called The Trapeze. We are in the process of having a poster for that movie framed, which will be presented to you. The image of you in the poster is a little bit vague, but we're working on having that clarified. But we do have a little a small token in connection with that. Go ahead and yeah, please do. Please tell people what it is that it's.
So far, 7 veils.
Right, but the veils will be.
It's a James Thurber book called The Middle-Aged Man on the Flying Trapeze.
We have another little present. We have a number of them. Please open this.
Nice.
Not quite, but almost. This is so that everybody will know exactly, when he's on the trapeze, we'll be able to see exactly where it is that he has been associated with. And we're absolutely terrified that while you are climbing rocks, you will fall off. And we have heard that you know, your equipment is not altogether up to date. So.
That's a very good store.
Right. Let me see how we get this open.
Somebody has it. This is not the job.
This was, by the way, with Brad Martin's advice. So I take no credit for.
He knows to say the mic, but
Yes, he does. He does very well, and he gave us some advice. And these are a whole bunch of, I'm not sure what to call them. What are these?
this is oh, beautiful. Oh wow.
What are these called?
These are camelots. They're the kind of devices that you put in the rock, so to protect yourself.
Please don't fall off. There are a few that are back ordered, but Brad advised us about what it is that you would need. So these will hopefully keep you safe while you are climbing, and then finally.
This is very exciting. I didn't expect
We know what we're doing here. Where's the number? If this isn't the right one, we're told that you can exchange with us. Not after the phone. Something to carry all of this equipment in. But the important thing is, please keep safe.
Last summer when I was climbing with Brad, the chipmunks chewed through my bag.
So again, I would like to thank Brad very much for his advice about what it is that you needed as far as this equipment goes. Would you like to say a few words, Steve?
Yes. After all the nice things that you've been hearing, I guess I have to give the other side now. But I've had a great time at Princeton. But there's no point in being jealous, or no need to be jealous, because I didn't deserve it. And you know, I realize that none of you approve of somebody getting something they don't deserve. And if you don't approve of it, you surely don't want it for yourself, so you can't be jealous, right? That's what I figure, right? But what can I do except, you know, try to thank you all. I think that there's one thing I want to do before I thank you all, and that is I want to lift a glass to one person who can't be here, one of my students, Lisa Lloyd, who was going to give a talk and is in the hospital. A very courageous lady, Lisa Lloyd.
To Lisa.
And that should be out and about again very soon. I want to thank well, I mean, she was one of my graduate students. And you've all been hearing all these nice things about me from my graduate students. I find this a little amazing, given the trouble that I've given them, you know. And Brad is still talking to me, and I know I've led him into mortal danger a number of times. I felt very guilty about where I brought him. But he survived, so I guess. And Nat and Alan, you know, Alan said very nicely that I helped to provide some sort of social life for these poor, destitute students who come here with no nightlife, right? But the fact is, what I remember is that Ned and Alan had this suite in the graduate college, about 3 times as large as anybody else's place to live there, that we had our first year seminar in the graduate college that year. But before that, about 5 o'clock, we would go for a happy time to Ned and Alan. Okay? And then we would eat together, and then we would have our seminar. And so social life was certainly not simply being provided by me. No, I have a lot to thank all these students for, mostly for all the things that they now are attributing to me, but which I would have thanked them for. Other people too. Yeah, all those good things that I got that I didn't deserve, of course, I got through the chairman, from Paul Benastraf to Dan Garber. So I want to thank them. Paul Benastraf, well, he personified Princeton to me for quite a long time, maybe to everybody. The department is a kind of abstract object, but he was the incarnation. The department made flesh, so to speak, right? And my first memory of Paul, since he gave his first memory of me in that Philadelphia APA meeting, I will graphically describe to you. He was sitting in the back, I think it must have been a smoker or something, sitting in the back on some chairs with Ruth Marcus, and got up to get a drink. In the meanwhile, the very little French-Canadian logician, Hugues Leblanc, comes over to talk to Ruth and starts sitting in Paul's chair. Paul picks him up by the shoulders, lands him there, and says, "That's my chair." So, maybe the reason I didn't come to Princeton was a little afraid. So I went out, you know, like a prodigal son, wandering around the world instead of coming to Princeton. And then finally, I really, I liked prodigal son. I wanted to come back. So I wrote to Paul, you know, and I didn't exactly invite myself, but I said, you know, if you still have some place or something, could I, So he writes back and he says, well, we don't have a position to offer you, but we'd like to come and visit for half a year. So I know the game. I know what that means, of course, right? That, yeah, they wanted to look me over, right? So I come in January of 1981, and this term doesn't start until February, right? So about 1 week before the term starts, Paul comes to me and he says, "Okay, we voted to make you an offer." I said, "Paul, I thought you were going to look me over." He said, "That was the plan, but we were afraid we would change our mind." Yeah, well, there were other things to be said. I had a real conversion experience here. Before I came, I was arguing vigorously against subjective probability. Somebody else that I knew and liked a lot, Henry Kaiberg, wrote a paper that I published in the journal I was editing. It was called Subjective Philosophy, and then there were 4 other words. The initials were CRAP. And you know, I was similarly arguing, you know, objective, frequency, stuff like that. But then what I did was I went to the seminars of Dick Jeffrey and David Lewis. And often they were in the same seminar. I mean, we were all sort of going to each other's seminars. It was more practice at the time, I think, than it turned out to be later. And I was completely converted to subjective probability. So that was a major intellectual milestone for me, to make that move. Was it the right one or not? Well, yeah, I think so. You know, I can, at the same, I mean, it's like taking on subjective probability in epistemology is like taking on a stray cat. I mean, you know all the ways in which it is dirty and wants to go back into the mud puddle, and you know all the things that perhaps you hope you can try and fix, but then it turns out it doesn't work. Well, the cat usually does all right in the end, I suppose, and I hope subjective probability will do all right in the end, even after, you know, Dick and David and me too stop trying very hard on it. That is really something that stands out in my mind very much. And yes, Alan mentioned that Dick had a whole song written for him. I'm your prisoner. No, I'm your prisoner. Yes, I'm your prisoner. You're my dilemma. And he sang he sang a verse of it, which I have on the CD of the Van Fraassens. I don't know. Is the CD for sale? Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are copies for sale. Okay, you can have the CD. I noticed, you know, we were playing it again yesterday just to listen to Dick's voice, and he was. I noticed then something I've forgotten, that he seemed to know some of the titles of the things I wrote because he was referring to the peculiar effects of love and desire and things like that in this story about subjective probability. So I think that's what that's what I sort of count as one of the major changes in my life. And I think that for me, subjectively speaking, this was very aptly celebrated by the Van Fraassens taking on Dick for their, at the time, what we thought was the farewell performance. But thank you, all of you.
Thank you all, and let me remind you that there will be a final performance of the Van Fraassens this evening after this dinner at Buzz's house. If any of you need a map to get there, just on Western Way, I have copies. Please come and see me. But thank you all so much for coming.